Hello, I'm from Tallinn University of Technology, expert of lighting devices, and I also am lecturing about light technology for the students. And since 2008 I have additionally been also working with measurement and measurement devices, and also photographing light. And in my presentation I would like to present one part of a study which is measurements in the Tallinn city panorama. And I will talk about it, what kind of measurements we were doing, and everybody who has come into contact with light pollution and light glare know these problems. Also, previous speakers has pointed out some problematic areas, some areas that have to be assessed in the cities, and sometimes also not only outdoors but indoors there can be disturbing light or glare, and sometimes we're not able to find the interior designer who has created this disturbing light indoors. But we do find these people who have created the outdoor lighting, and definitely we have to reduce the general light and light pollution that is created also by advertisements and other light sources. But how to create respective legislative acts, what are the thresholds and how to assess lighting? This is what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to show pictures, and this study of Tallinn lighting is still in process. It continues, and I will also answer the questions later on after the presentation. First, we made some measurements of the city Tallinn panorama, and these studies still continue also. This is one of the methods of studying light pollution, that we measure the brightness or the lightness or luminosity. And the previous speaker was also talking about how to assess brightness or lightness, and astronomers have their own parameters to assess it, and from there, from satellite pictures, also mirroring of the skies, and also studies of solar panels, and also how we see the stars. Also questionnaires have been carried out. But all of these information sources, do they give us sufficient feedback? Is this feedback sufficient for the city? Not always. And there should be definitely certain parameters in place that we could proceed from when assessing the situation, and also that would give us a possibility to give feedback for architects, planners, transport and traffic planners about what kind of parameters, have to be defined and assessed. Before this study, we also carried out another study for Tallinn Transportation Department, where we assessed LED lights, spots and screens. And I would also like to point out this topic, and it should also be further studied. It would be even more important, even globally, it would be more important to talk about these topics of light pollution, light glare, from the same starting points. And already now some certain trends exist, and one of the trends is carrying out measurements with calibrated measurement devices. And from the point of view of assessing city environments, very often we proceed from different devices that are meant for measuring of lightness, brightness. And when we tried to make conclusions or summary about how this all has been solved in different countries, we saw that countries have different solutions. And of course, it's all affected by what the possibilities are in different countries. But in order to find some common points, it's important to mention that the measurement devices should correspond to certain standards. Also, the methods should be the same. And we, in our study, also measured the panorama of the city of Tallinn, and the coastline in the city of Tallinn is very diverse, and therefore we took different directions to measure. And in addition, we also carried out targeted spot studies. Now, in order to make an overview how this problem has been solved globally, we looked at different solutions of measurements, calibrated measurements of panorama views, and also measurements from satellites. And again, while satellite pictures have been made since 2012, and in our study we analyze the results of 2012 to 2021. And the question is whether the devices that measurements are carried out with, are they calibrated? Can they be compared and followed? Whether the devices have such a sensitivity that they can use both LED lamps and also usual lamps, and what the spectrum area are from 500 nanometers, but humans can see from 380 nanometers. It all means that we do not know how exact the pictures are when these photos have been made, whether the environmental aspects, also the weather aspects, have been considered. Everything also affects the quality of the pictures. But we used a standard of outdoor lighting that is standard 12464.2, and this standard has also special cameras that uses this standard, and the cameras used have to consider that they have to be calibrated in the nanometers, and then how they have been also matched to traffic circumstances. So right now we are doing spot site measurements, and the standards requires that we should reduce disturbing lighting. We should also, the standard also points out what the maximum permissible limits in outdoor devices is. And then that lighting should be restrained where it is disturbing for humans and for fauna and flora. And in many big cities, there are different environmental zones, E1, E2, and many cities, including Tallinn, has also chosen its standard, that is E3. And there are different screens for advertisements, for light signs that have a very high light value. And the earlier screens that were lighted, luminophone or metal halide lighting devices with from upside down lighting was the earlier solution. Nowadays solution is that screens are lighted from inside, and the level should be brought down from 400 to 600 candelas. And for facades of buildings it should be 10 units for 1 square meter, etc. And also for restricted time, the number of lux used for lighting is different. All of these lightings standard, for example 13201 for traffic standard, and other standards are interconnected, and all of these standards coincide rather well and can be assessed. And I have brought to this slide also standards for LED screens. Many Scandinavian countries also have their own regulations for assessing light. But Tallinn has brought out this E3 zone that are industrial and areas with living areas as well. So what were the spots from where we did our measurements? Heaven, harbor area, another harbor area in Meeruse, and Pikokari. Here on this map you can see the views and what are the problematic areas. From all of these 5 areas during this study, we made some photos and described problematic spots. I'm going to show some of them. some of the photographs and also results of measurements. On the right side, you can see also the light or brightness values of measurements. And for all of these measurement values, the information can be saved and later on compared with what has been changed, how much it has been changed, and whether light pollution of one of another area has been changed. We can also see Õismäe high buildings on this photo. Recently it seemed that they were not a part of the light pollution earlier, but now it has changed. And then in Meeruse area we photographed both a promenade when lighting was on and without lighting, and here you can see the result. And especially when there are dome-shaped lighting devices, we can see how much pollution they bring into the city areas. And some buildings are problematic. For example, a building named Laev that has a lighting that covers the whole building, and we can see it clearly over Kopli Bay, and the brightness values are much higher than the ones that have been introduced in Tallinn. We're not talking about 800 candelas for a square meter, but many times higher numbers. This is the shopping center, and also advertising screens in this shopping area. Then the next measurements were done from Katariina Pier, and here we can see Oleviste Church as well as shopping centers and the city's center. Then the next one, which is the harbor area, one of the biggest lighted areas in Tallinn. It should be decreased, and then there is a lot of problems here with the glare also, how the light has been directed. Then the promenades, also lighting of promenades in bicycle roads. If we would like to additionally bring out some spots in the city, also for example the big carousel on the roof of one of the shopping areas, then we should consider whether it's situated in a dwelling area with the residential houses or not. Then the city probably could allow also a little bit higher levels of lighting. But as a general summary, we could say that dome-shaped lighting devices create flight pollution and they should be exchanged. Tallinn nowadays has about 40% of LED lamps, but it's going to increase to about 80%. Then dimming or adjusting lighting to movement, and it's going to decrease the general brightness for more than 50 times. Light pollution is created by advertisement screens, and they can be switched out, and the general level of lightness can be decreased by 15%. And there is a clear difference in lighting of bicycle lines as well as promenades and Ülemiste area. So our suggestion is that the most polluting areas have to be mapped and more detailed studied, carried out, and also the light solutions have to be adjusted in cooperation with different institutions. That was a short summary of the results of our study. And if you would like to ask questions, I'm ready to answer them. Thank you very much, Toivo, for presenting these measurement results. And I would like to ask the first question. You mentioned that there is no standardized methodology for assessing light pollution. What are the main problems that lack of this methodology brings along? Well, the results of this is that the measurement results are interpreted differently. I mentioned that in different countries, the approaches are very different, and very often astronomical studies are used. It definitely does help, but it does not necessarily give a sufficient overview about how local governments should create these regulations or what kind of approach they should use. Any questions from the audience?
I'm coming from Budapest, and you mentioned that the light pollution can be dangerous from this different point of view, and there are some objects which are highly illuminated. But do you have any regulation, for example, on facade lighting or on the carousel, for example, you mentioned, how bright it should be maximum, or the private ownership, as in all countries, I know, is the same. You don't touch the private rights. But somehow, as a scientist, can you influence the politicians with information that even though a private ownership is important, and that's a main saint of our economy, but it can have negative effects if you don't have any regulations on that? Thank you.
I will start in Estonia. Negative regulations. In other words, how to introduce restrictions. Well, certain regulations for certain values do exist, but how to create, how to describe these regulations. With our studies, we have given some recommendations about parameters that we recommend for traffic environment, for buildings, but talking about private objects and how these should be regulated. It's also connected to questions about lighting of city areas and buildings, how to design them, how to approach these questions from architectural point of view. We have to give certain frameworks. As a researcher, when I approach this question as a researcher, we only can give recommendations about what the trends should be, what kind of light sources should be used in one or another type of zones in city areas, and we can recommend only this or that type of lighting. I would like to add that this is exactly this kind of a study. So researchers have done this study in order to create the recommendations. One more question. First, I would like to comment this question about lighting of private areas. I think that there is a regulation where it says that the numbers of buildings, private houses, should be visible, and there should be a light spot on it. And everybody improvises when lighting up the number of his or her building. And if it's very disturbing, then the neighbors have to solve it somehow. But I was looking at the numbers. And one of the solutions is to approach the question fully technically, but together with the ordering party, there should also be a discussion about lighting solutions, because in a couple of years maybe trees or bushes grow higher and they will cover the lighting. And my acquaintances have been asking that the Song Festival ground in Tallinn was earlier using nice lighting, but now it's all covered by trees. So what would you say about this? Well, this topic has not been discussed, but in our studies we have also pointed out how greenery in cities affects general lighting, how facades are lighted. In our studies we do elaborate on this. And there will be also a continuation study, further study, and definitely we will also give our recommendations which regulations should be used. And in international studies, we haven't seen, in fact, basic, clear definitions for local governments. So it's very hard to find somebody from where we could copy the recommendations, and it's also hard to find international studies with explanation, argumentation about why lighting should be regulated. Thank you very much, Toivo.